I, 28 male, am a software engineer who spent 3 years thinking compromise was just another word for love. My girlfriend, 26 female, and I lived in a high-rise in Chicago that I paid for entirely while she found herself through a string of failed influencer startups and expensive hobbies. The power dynamic wasn't just skewed, it was a dictatorship. The breaking point happened on a Tuesday. I came home from a 60-hour workweek to find the apartment trashed from a content shoot she hosted with her friends. There were glitter stains on my Italian leather sofa and camera gear plugged into every outlet. When I asked her to help clean, she didn't even look up from her ring light. She told me the mess was for the brand and then told me to go wash the Tesla, which I pay for, before dinner. I told her I wasn't her assistant and that I was tired of being her personal bank. She finally turned around, looking at me with pure entitlement, and laughed. She said, "The bank? Honey, you're lucky to even be in the same room as me. You're a bore. You're safe. You'll never leave because you don't have the spine for it. You're not man enough to leave me." I didn't yell. I just looked at her and realized I'd been funding a stranger for 3 years. I whispered, "Watch me." She rolled her eyes and shouted that she was going out with the girls and the place better be clean by the time she got back. As soon as that elevator door clicked, I went to work. I'd been documenting things for a month because the brand she was building was actually being funded by a credit card she'd opened in my name, a secondary card I'd authorized for emergencies only, that she'd racked up $40,000 on for designer bags and travel. My brother showed up 20 minutes later with a U-Haul. We didn't just pack. We stripped that apartment. Since I owned 90% of the furniture and every electronic device, the place went from a luxury showroom to a concrete box in 3 hours. I took the router, the espresso machine, and even the light bulbs from the lamps I'd bought. I left her passport, her cheap fast fashion clothes, and her makeup on the floor. Everything else, the stuff I paid for, was gone. I sent a group text to her 3 closest friends, the ones she talked trash about the second they left. I told them I was out, and that since she'd used my credit card to pay for their VIP tables and trips, I'd reported the charges as unauthorized. I told them the bank would be clawing that money back from the vendors, and since their names were on the reservations, they should check their own accounts. I blocked them all immediately. I handed the keys to the concierge, told him I was terminating the lease early, I'd already paid the penalty, and moved into a place I'd lined up under a corporate name she'd never recognize. I turned off my phone and drove. 3 days later, I turned my phone back on. 142 missed calls. 384 texts. At first, she was smug, asking where the TV was. Then she was desperate, saying she was sleeping on the floor. Then she hit peak rage, calling me a coward and a loser because her friends were threatening to sue her over the flagged credit card charges. Her mother, who lives off alimony and expected me to do the same for her daughter, emailed me claiming I had a legal obligation to provide for her and that they were calling the police for theft. I just smiled. My father is a retired contract attorney. He didn't raise a fool. When she moved in, she signed a cohabitation agreement stating that all furnishings and high-value assets remained my sole property unless gifted in writing. She'd called me neurotic when she signed it. Now, that agreement was a noose. I waited until Friday to respond. I wanted her to sit in that empty, echoey apartment for 3 days to realize that lifestyle she flaunted wasn't hers. I emailed her and her mother, CCing my lawyer. I told them the lease was terminated and they had 48 hours to vacate. I also mentioned that the Tesla, which was in my name, was reported as unauthorized use and a recovery team was on the way. The explosion was immediate. My building's hallway camera showed her standing outside the door, screaming at the concierge in a $3,000 coat I'd bought her. The concierge, who I'd tipped well for years, just told her she wasn't on the lease and her clothes were in trash bags by the service elevator. Then the dirty trick started. Her mother called my HR department claiming I was a financial abuser. My HR director, a total pro, called me into a Zoom. I didn't get defensive. I just screen-shared the police report for the $40,000 in fraudulent charges and showed receipts of influencer trips she took with her ex while I was at work. HR blocked her mother's number from the company's switchboard. By Friday night, she tried to manipulate me. She texted saying she was testing me and wanted me to fight for her. She said she was at a disgusting motel and was scared. I knew the motel was actually her ex-boyfriend's apartment. I knew this because one of her friends sent me a screenshot of their group chat where my ex was bragging about how she was going to sue me for palimony and take half my 401k so she could move to Miami with the ex. They thought they were the smartest people in the room. They didn't realize that in Illinois, palimony is almost non-existent without a marriage certificate, and our signed agreement literally said she had zero claim to my assets. I told her to meet me at a coffee shop near the courthouse on Monday. She showed up looking vulnerable and reached for my hand, asking me to call the bank and fix the mistake with the credit cards. I just put a manila envelope on the table. It wasn't the keys, it was a summons. I was suing her for the $40,000 in fraud, the $12,000 in damages to the furniture, and I'd already given the DA evidence of identity theft. Her face turned purple. She screamed that she gave me the best years of her life. I told her she gave me 3 years of bills and insults. Then I dropped the best part. I talked to her manager, the ex. I told him if he didn't testify that she used my cards to pay for his flights, I'd name him as a co-conspirator. Since he had a prior record for fraud, he threw her under the bus in about 5 seconds. He gave me every text and Venmo transaction they shared. Her mother burst into the shop, screaming about how I couldn't throw a woman on the street. I told her there were no keys, just a legal bill that would take her daughter a decade to pay. I also suggested she get a defense attorney because I'd found the consulting fees she'd been funneling from my account to her mother's interior design firm. It was a kickback scheme and tax evasion. I hadn't just called the police. I'd called the IRS. As they marched out, a black SUV pulled in behind them. It was the recovery team for the Tesla. I'd tracked the GPS and timed it perfectly. The scene was chaotic. Her mother was hitting the SUV window while my ex sat in the passenger seat refusing to get out. The police arrived, and since the car was registered to my corporation, they didn't negotiate. They told her to get out or be charged with resisting. I watched from the window as she was forced to step out onto the asphalt. For the first time, she wasn't filtered through an app. She was just a girl who played a game she didn't understand. My phone buzzed with a notification. One of her friends had posted a video compilation of her luxury posts, calling her a thief and a fraud. Her reputation was nuked. The fallout was massive. My ex took a plea deal to avoid heavy prison time. She got 5 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and a restitution order for the full $40,000 plus interest. Her brand is dead, her social media was seized as evidence, and her mother's firm was shut down after a massive tax lien wiped out her savings. I moved into a house by the lake with a very secure biometric lock on my office door. I learned that being man enough doesn't mean putting up with disrespect. It means having the self-respect to walk away and the brains to make sure they can never follow you. I'm not a bore anymore. I'm a man who knows exactly what he's worth, and I have the receipts to prove it. Loved seeing a boss babe get a reality check from a safe guy who actually had receipts? Subscribe to see more stories where the quiet ones finally decide to play for keeps.